she went her whole life with doctors telling her, hey, you can only take these medications. You're never going to be able to get pregnant because you have PCOS. And then she came to me. We looked at her test. I'm like, oh, we just need to do this. And she bawled her eyes out. She goes, you mean to tell me that I could have had a child? Yeah, you could have. We just needed to tweak these things. All right, everybody. So let's get after. Welcome to another episode of the Doc Jacque Show. We're going to be switching gears. We've been talking about digestion a lot. Now we're going to be going into hormones. And so I thought, what better way to go into hormones than to start with 5 reasons why you should get your hormones tested. So if you are on birth control, you should absolutely get your hormones tested. There are many different types of birth control. There are supposed non-hormonal. There are obviously hormonal. There's so many different types. Each and every one is going to have a different impact on the body. And with that, when you do these certain hormonal panels like a Dutch Plus or a Dutch test, you'll be able to see how your body is accepting and regulating your hormones in the presence of your birth control, right? A lot of people get put on birth control at a very young age, and they're never really told the difficulties or complications or the risks associated with being on birth control. So if you got put on when you were a kid because you couldn't regulate your cycles, or you had bad acne, or if you had bad cramps, again, PMS, PMDD, remember, you're not, or hopefully you're not the same person as when you got put on the birth control. You're healthier, you should be healthier, older, and know a little bit more about how to get your body optimized. So number 1, if you are on birth control, you should still get your hormones tested. I remember way back in, I think it was 8th grade, I was sitting in class. There was a student of ours, she sat right next to me. I remember her, sat right next to me, and she was always in really good shape. Then she went through a summer, came back, and she put on a ton of weight. And I asked her what had changed, and she said she got put on birth control, right? It stopped her cycle. So if you're on a birth control and the goal is to stop your cycle and it lowers your progesterone output, what can happen is you can increase your overall estrogen and therefore create some form of an estrogen dominance that takes place in the body. On top of that, birth controls are going to have, especially oral, are going to have a huge effect, a negative effect on your liver. So it may not seem like you have symptoms to start, but then as the years and years or months and months go by that you're on this stuff, then all of a sudden your liver can't clear, you develop estrogen dominance, you can have this gynecomastia because your body cannot clear the estrogens due to the birth control. So again, if you're on birth control, or even if you're thinking about getting put on birth control, I aggressively recommend test your hormones first, figure out why your body is responding the way that it is, and figure out what naturally you can do to get your body back to normal, because that's ultimately what we want. We don't want to be on birth control your entire life. It's not healthy for you, and I don't think anybody really thinks birth control is healthy for you, okay? Number 2, if you have PMS or PMDD, right? And this is something where I work with so many females and their hormones, and I still laugh because it's like, I'll ask them about their cycle and they're like, oh, my cycle is great. It's normal. I'm so happy with my cycle. And then I start digging, right, on these new patient intakes. I'm like, hey, all right, do you have cramps? Oh, yeah. I've got real bad cramps. I just take an ibuprofen for it. Or, yeah, I got really bad clots, comes out, or I miss my cycle every once in a while, or it's like 4 or 5 days late. And so what I've realized here is that when it comes to female hormones, females compare their cycle to everyone else around them. And the unfortunate thing about that is so many women have irregular cycles that you're going to match up your pattern with theirs. So if you've got horrible cramps and they've got horrible cramps, and it's normal in your mind, right? If they get horrifically emotional or just get horrible back cramps or painful, just anger, rage, etc. And Susie down the street gets the same thing. Well, guess what? That's just, it's the menstrual cycle. So yeah, just got to get used to it. No, it's not true. There's something wrong. Your menstrual cycle should never be something that you hate, regret, or fear that it's coming. You should just be like, oh, there it is. That's really nice. And that's how a lot of my patients are. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the first cycle in 30 years that I've had. That's great. Or 20 some years that it's great. And it's like, well, yeah, we figured out the cause. So if you're suffering with PMS or PMDD, first just look at the definition of that and see how many of those you can checkbox and say, yes, I have that symptom. And I kind of wish that I didn't have that symptom, right? Again, whether it's the irritability, or you have right before your period comes, you gain 10 pounds or 15 pounds, right? Or if you get tender breast tissue, or you have clotting, cramping, mood disorders, depression, almost suicidal thoughts going into like the PMDD, there is a reason for that. You figure it out. You won't need, quote unquote, need birth control. You'll be able to rebuild your body naturally from within. So if you have PMS or PMDD, get your hormones tested, okay? Number 3 is if you're dealing with infertility or if you're not ovulating. That should be kind of a no-brainer. And I would say get your hormones tested, but get them tested properly. And going forward in this, when I'm talking about get your hormones tested, I'm not talking about a blood test for hormones. That's fine. You can get some certain markers in blood that you can't get on a Dutch test, like, luteinizing hormone, follicle-stimulating hormone. You could check out your hemoglobin A1C, your blood sugar in there. All great markers as we go into like the next topic we're going into with endometriosis and PCOS. But if you have infertility or if you have lack of ovulation, typically it's going to come down to a progesterone issue. So you're going to want to evaluate not just the hormones, right? Not just the sex hormones, but the adrenal hormones, right? And so the Dutch is a way to kind of combine the two of those. So you want to do a salivary adrenal. And if you say, well, I did a blood cortisol and it was normal, well, it's a completely inaccurate test. Completely inaccurate. So get it done through saliva to test those adrenals, and then also get the urine done as well. Dutch Plus is the best test you can do in order to really fully evaluate how your hormones are, okay? The next one here, right? So the next one is going to be one that we're going to spend a little bit more time on, and we can go into these more in depth. I'm just going to try to broad swoop this. If you have a diagnosis of PCOS or endometriosis, or if you have excessive weight gain, get your hormones tested properly. Okay, get them tested. It doesn't mean that you have to suffer with PCOS the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you have to suffer with endometriosis your whole life, right? And I'll never forget this story. This one patient that I have, she is now past her child rearing age. She's older than she would like to be to start having kids. She's in her 50s, and she went her whole life with doctors telling her, hey, you can only take these medications. You're never going to be able to get pregnant because you have PCOS. And so she never tried. She never cared. She never did anything for like 40 years. And then she came to me. We looked at her tests. I'm like, oh, we just need to do this. And she bawled her eyes out. She goes, you mean to tell me that I could have had a child? Yeah, you could have. We just needed to tweak these things. This is stuff that can permanently, mentally handicap people if they think if they want to have children and they find this diagnosis, this can be horrible for them. And again, we push this into like the infertility side of things. With PCOS, it makes it difficult to become pregnant. If you have endometriosis, it could be difficult as well. But there's always a fucking cause. Find it, test it properly, right? Not blood, Dutch Plus, okay? So there are 4 main types of PCOS, and I'm going to wrap them all with a pretty bow at the end. The first one is the most common. It's insulin-resistant PCOS. What does this come from? Okay, what is insulin? Let's just start with that. Insulin is something that's secreted from the pancreas to help our body to handle blood sugar, right? So if we eat carbs, we produce insulin from our pancreas. Our pancreas takes that, or the insulin takes that glucose and shuttles it to wherever it needs to go in the body, okay, or takes care of it, gets rid of it, etc. It takes care of it. Insulin takes care of glucose. As stress goes on, as poor dietary habits continue, we start to develop these conditions where we have what's known as insulin resistance. Okay, and insulin resistance means, I'm going to make these numbers up, but pretend, for example, that you eat we'll call them molecules, or 1 unit of glucose, and you produce 1 unit of insulin, and that's all you need. 1 to 1, boom, it takes care of it. As you start developing resistance, your body is less sensitive to that insulin. So that 1 molecule or 1 unit of glucose then requires 2 units of insulin, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, so on and so forth, right? And you can get your blood insulin measured. We want it to be down below like 6 or so, all right, a functional range of below 6 to tell us that your body is handling your sugar appropriately. We'll bow this all together. We'll tie it all together with the bow at the end because they're all going to be riding along with each other. But that's going to be the most common type. And I can tell you that it's reversible. All of these are. Okay. The other one is going to be post-birth control PCOS, right? What I just talked about with birth control. Don't take it. It's freaking horrible for your body. And if you take it, there are long-term side effects with that. And what can happen is you have these hormonal surges that take place after you come off the pill, right? And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I have PCOS. Now I've got this growth. I've got cysts on top of, your ovaries, or if you have endometriosis, now you have fibroid cysts. You have all of these things that are growing and you're growing and you're growing. And you're like, what the hell is going on? And it's due to your body, your organs coming back online and overproducing hormones because they were never really told what to do or how to do it appropriately. Okay. Now it's usually temporary. It usually goes away. You get this hormonal surge that takes place and it usually tapers off. But in case you are growing, ovarian cysts there, it can have some long-term ramifications for your health and for your well-being. Okay. That's number 2. Number 3 is inflammatory PCOS. Okay. So if you have chronic inflammation, you've got Lyme's disease, you've got mold toxicity, or you just eat, again, consistently horribly for how long, and you're stressed out all the time, you don't sleep, etc., well, then you're going to develop inflammatory PCOS. Okay, the next one is going to be adrenal PCOS, where your body has an elevated DHEA sulfate or DHEAS, and that's going to be due to stress and inflammation, right? So let's just talk about this, right? So we've got insulin-resistant PCOS, we've got post-birth control PCOS, we've got inflammatory PCOS, and we have adrenal PCOS. All are intimately connected to the point where I don't know why maybe the post-birth control one makes sense to have a separate category for it because you did it to yourself or your doctor did it to you, but the rest of them all coincide together, right? How does disease start in our body? Number 1, we need inflammation. Okay, inflammation for a long period of time. Acute inflammation is good for us. It helps to rebuild the body, but chronic inflammation over a period of time is going to consistently lead our body into what's known as a catabolic physiology or catabolic state. All that means is that our body is consistently breaking itself down. Anabolic, rebuild, catabolic, break down. So if we are inflamed for a long period of time, right? We can have inflammatory PCOS. If that doesn't kick in, what's going to happen? Our adrenals are also going to be stressed and taxed. Inflammation, okay, is stress. It's a threat to the body. Therefore, cortisol is going to go up. Adrenals are going to have to work extra hard, right? And then we start to overcomplicate our insulin and our glucose systems here, right? So our blood sugar regulation. So we start to develop insulin resistance, right? Because we have inflammation first, catabolic physiology second, and then third, we develop insulin resistance. They are all steps that go together. So they shouldn't be separated. It's find that root cause, find out what caused that inflammation to begin with, rebuild the body, become anabolic again, right? And then make sure that if you have any insulin resistance, that we resensitize your body to insulin to reverse insulin resistance. Is it easy? It's not. Is it doable? Is it possible? Absolutely. 1,000%. My patients do it all the time. It just takes a lot of work on your end. We have to stop these blood sugar spikes. We have to stop those cravings. And usually it has to do with the gut. We got to work with emotional side of things, work on relationships, stress with work, again, relationships, sleep, children. All this stuff is like this perfect recipe for disaster when it comes to your hormones. And this is how we develop these types of PCOS, right? Now, there are some forms of PCOS that people will say are genetic, which is where your body just has a preference towards these inflammatory alpha pathways. So like testosterone, androsterone, 5-alpha, so 5-alpha DHT pathways, it can cause issues with your hormones, right? It can trigger PCOS. It can lead to hyperandrogenism, which is where you have too many androgens and your body can't stop producing them. Okay, and if we have high DHEA sulfate, right, that means the adrenals are kicking in, but if we look at your estrogens and see how they're clearing out, usually there's a bottleneck somewhere. Your body can't get rid of those estrogens, okay? And this is where we talk about PCOS, or endometriosis. This is where we talk about endometriosis. Now, endometriosis, this is going to be fun to talk about, right? So PCOS is typically going to be androgen induced, if you will, because we have insulin resistance. We typically have problems with our androgens. If we have an inflammation, we're going to have issues with our androgens because the inflammatory pathway is going to cause more to go down to this DHT pathway. Okay, so if we now go and we shift over to our estrogens, right? If you do blood test estrogen, you're going to get typically your estradiol or E2. It's like one of 3, 6, 7, like one of 7 estrogens basically that are within the body. We'll go through this list of it, right? So if we have endometriosis, typically that's going to be due to too much estrogen within the body. Estrogen, though it is beneficial for us in proper concentrations, and I aggressively say proper concentrations because there's this person online who, fuck it, I'll just say it. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about when it comes to estrogens. He tries to say that estrogen dominance is not real, which is bullshit. It's absolutely real. And he tried to say, be happy if you have too much estrogen, which again is absolute bullshit. If you want to challenge me on it, come challenge me on it. We could talk about it. Anyways, I got really fired up about that. I'm going to try not to let that just take over the show here, but for the love of God, estrogen dominance is real and it's fucking everybody up. So that's what makes me very mad. Anyways, he said it's just genetic, which is also bullshit. Anyways, so when it comes to estrogens, right, we can have issues with the 3 different phases of estrogen clearing. Okay. And I always like to start at the end, work my way up. Okay. We'll use like bathtub examples, right? So if we're dumping buckets of estrogen or buckets of water into the bathtub and the drain is open, then the drain is able to flush those estrogens out. But if somebody popped down that drain and we keep throwing estrogen into that bathtub, what's going to happen? The estrogen levels are going to rise. Okay. Now, if that's the case, right, that's going to be a phase 3 problem. If the drain is plugged, we can't get rid of those estrogens out the colon, so out the bowel movements, and therefore we develop a form of estrogen dominance. Now, where the genetic component of this comes into play, right, is if we have something like an MTHFR or a COMT deficiency where we just need some methyl donors, right? And the Dutch test will show this. But phase 2 is when we take those broken down portions of estrogen, okay, and then we formulate and we form into what's known as 2-hydroxy estrogen or 2-hydroxyestrone, 2-OHE1 if you want to look at it on the test, and then you form 2-methoxy, right? You add that methyl group and you'll have a fan gauge that says, hey, I do a great job of that or I do a horrible job of that. And you just throw some methyl donors at it. That opens up phase 2 of estrogen clearance, okay? And then the third type of estrogen dominance that you can have is if we have a problem with phase 1. And that's if we're taking a look at your hormones, you have estrone, estradiol, and estriol, so E1, E2, E3, and those levels are sky high. They're like red-tipped arrows or high-end range, and you look down at the metabolites and like, pew, or you'll have like postmenopausal even, then we know that there's a phase 1 problem, right? So we have to kind of poke a hole in a bucket and make sure all those pathways are nice and open and the estrogens flush accordingly. Now, there are the estrone, estradiol, and estriol. Those are the 3 primary estrogens. Then you can have 16-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 2-hydroxy. And the last one we already talked about, 2-methoxy. Those are metabolites. So smaller broken down portions of estrogen. The 4-hydroxy, 4-OHE1 on the test has a red arrow. 16-OHE1 is another bad one too. That's dealing with cell proliferation. We can have a lot of estrogen dominant symptoms, painful cramping. We can have endometriosis due to that. If we have high 4-OHE1, that can also trigger endometriosis or endometrial growth, right? And so we look at these things and we're like, hey, and again, talking to this guy, if we're talking genetically speaking, it's insanely rare to have issues with too much estrogen, genetically speaking. You can have an over aromatase activity that converts your testosterone into estrogen, right? But genetically speaking, you can alter some of those things, but typically it's going to be a clearance issue. Okay. And now where I get fired up is like, I know a couple friends that they've had gynecomastia in the past, right? And it drives me crazy. They've had gynecomastia in the past, right? And so I know their history. I know their health history. I know what they've been going through. I know what they've taken. I know how their body responds to certain compounds and certain chemicals. And when you increase synthetic testosterone, Okay, even if it's like an HRT form, you're increasing synthetic. It can come from yams, it can come from bioidentical sources, but ultimately you're increasing testosterone at high levels. Your body is going to convert that because it has to. It's a normal flow of hormones. Testosterone will convert into estradiol. If your body cannot clear that estradiol, then your body is going to produce more of an estrogen dominant presentation. In men, it's going to be gynecomastia, it's going to be weight gain, it's going to be belly fat. It's going to be very similar symptoms as if you're a woman with high levels of estrogens, right? And so the thought and theory on that is all you have to do is get that cut out, right? Get some chest surgery, some breast surgery there, and you never have to worry about high level estrogens again, right? When has surgery ever solved the cause of a problem? Never has. Okay? And you took away your fire alarm, you sprayed over a check engine light on that, and you're trying to pretend that just because you cut that out doesn't mean you're increasing conversion to estrogen, doesn't mean you're causing more harm and more problems to the freaking body. So if you think just getting gynecomastia surgery is going to do it, you're fucking lying to yourself. And you better get your hormones tested properly. You better make sure that you found out underlying causes of why your hormones are high. Now that's male side of things. Women don't typically get gynecomastia. They can get fibrocystic breast tissue, right? You can have, again, endometriosis here, but the majority of what I'm talking about getting your hormones tested, this is going to be female derived. So trying to talk about the women getting their hormones tested here. Men, I just sprinkled a little bit of that in there for you. Men, you typically know when to get your hormones tested. If you got low hormones or low testosterone, you're going to have low sex drive. You're not going to have the ability to be able to get it up. Or I joke and say, you know, it's kind of like you're pushing rope. You're going to know that your hormones are off. It's a lot easier for men to kind of tell that than it is for women. Okay. So endometriosis is going to be more of an estrogen dominant presentation. We have to figure out why those estrogens raised high to begin with, and we need to flush them out. If it's not an estrogen based issue, then we're going to look up at progesterone and make sure you have proper levels of progesterone. What can cause a decrease in progesterone? Stress, inflammation, okay, medication usage, birth controls, right? So you could be put on a birth control and all of a sudden you start developing endometriosis. Okay, so again, be aware, be prepared for all of these scenarios. Okay, so endometriosis. So we deviated a lot on that. I got heated on a lot of that. So I'm going to go back into it again. So again, 5 signs you need to get your hormones tested. So it's going to be if you're on birth control, if you've got issues with PMS or PMDD, if you have any type of fertility issues, okay, or lack of ovulation, excessive weight gain, PCOS, endometriosis. And then the next one's going to be hormonal acne. Okay, so if you have this acne that's usually around like the chin line, maybe on the forehead, women, you're typically going to be looking at an excess in your androgens. And we already kind of talked about what can be causing this. PCOS can cause, you can have balding of the hair as well. It's going to be due to inflammation. It's going to be due to insulin resistance. So the same things that we talk about for the rest of these hormones are going to still hold true for what we're talking about for the hormonal acne. Okay. Now, with hormonal acne, you want to be really careful because treatment methodologies for that is usually going to be something that's very, very aggressive to the skin. And remember, whatever you put on your skin immediately absorbs into the skin within like 30 seconds. Stuff's getting absorbed. So if you're putting heavy duty chemicals on the skin to try to treat the skin, then your body, your liver has to process those toxins. And if you have acne due to liver congestion, and you throw more toxins in, your acne is going to get worse. Okay, so be careful of that. On the highest level, in the highest degree of acne treatment, you're going to have Accutane, which I still can't believe this stuff is still out there being prescribed for people. Okay, Accutane is something that is so harsh on the body that I took this when I was in high school. I had bad acne, and it was all hormonal, and I ate like shit. So my back was just like, I don't know what to do. So I it's there. I've got scars from it. That matched with my 2nd-degree burns from falling asleep at a swimming pool. I digress again. When we're talking about that Accutane, I remember on the back of the pill bottle or on the back of the pill pack, it had a picture of a pregnant woman with a red line through it and said, don't take this if you're pregnant. And you had to get blood tests regularly to make sure your liver enzymes didn't shoot up high. And what you look at, if you look into the damage that Accutane causes, it can cause miscarriages. It can cause infertility. It can cause low testosterone. It can cause liver damage. It can cause everything under the sun. So again, if you have hormonal acne, for the love of Pete, don't let somebody put you on that stuff without finding out why your body is the way that it is. And again, talking symptomatically speaking, we're covering up symptoms with Accutane, but what's it doing to your liver? If your liver is toxic, you damage the liver and damage its ability to clear toxins, what's going to happen? More acne is going to happen. So you come off of this stuff and you think you're clear, and then all of a sudden your liver's like, yeah, joke's on you. I can't clear anything now because you poisoned me for the last 6 months or however long you're on the stuff, okay? So hormonal acne is there. The last one is the bonus one. So those are the top 5 reasons or top 5 reasons why you need to get the hormones tested. Number 6, the bonus, if you're going to just an endocrinologist. And I'm going to say just an endocrinologist because an endocrinologist is not going to get to the bottom of the problem. An endocrinologist is going to put you on hormones. It's going to put you on birth control. It's going to throw everything off. It's going to poison your body. They don't know how to test properly, and you're not going to get answers. Okay? If you know, hormonally speaking, that your body is a freaking wreck, and you know a week or 2 weeks or the whole month is just chaos for your hormones. You're emotional. You have your menstrual cycle. You're bleeding. You're spotting in between cycles. You don't have ovulation. You're just kind of crazy all month long. You go to an endocrinologist. An endocrinologist does a blood test. Like, oh, everything looks great, and you're like, well, what's wrong with my hormones then? And you're left with no answers. If you want answers, get a Dutch test. Get a Dutch plus test. Okay, if you're missing your cycle or your cycle's off and you can't really track it, then do a Dutch cycle map. But for the majority out there with a relatively normal cycle in terms of like day-wise, like, hey, it comes on the 30 days or 35 days or give or take this or that, you can get away with running a standard Dutch plus. All of this stuff is still going to come down to the same principles I teach on every single disease, disorder, syndrome in the body. Start with the foundation. You can test your hormones and say, oh man, my hormones are a mess. But did you test the cause? Hormones, okay? As you can tell, hormones are responses to our body's internal workings. If we have stress on the body, hormones are going to be different. If we're toxic, hormones are going to be different. If we're not sleeping, hormones are going to be different. If we're on medication, hormones are going to be different, right? Hormones are always going to respond to our internal environment. If we change our internal environment, then the hormones will also have to change because they're no longer suitable for a stressed out, toxic internal environment. Okay? Start with this foundation. If you want to just run a test and say, I just want to see what my hormones look like, then go and get one. Call us, get one. Okay? Or you can go to the lab shop, get one. And then when you look at it, you're like, I have no idea what this is talking about. Or if you look at it, like, oh crap, everything is red or everything is in the postmenopausal range and I'm 25 years old, which I see all the time, right? People in menopause, hormonally speaking, in menopause, in their 20s. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on here? It's usually stress. It's usually inflammation. It's usually catabolic physiology. It's usually insulin resistance. Right? The standard American diet, the standard American society is creating these disease processes within us. Every single year it gets worse. Every single year, more people are sick, more people are dying, more people are on medications, and it's not stopping. Take your health back. Run these tests yourself. You can get them without even ever talking to me. You click on the lab store. There you go. Boom. There's your test. Grab it. Good. Now you have answers. What are you going to do about it? It's going to take work. If you're not willing to put in the work, don't do the test. Otherwise, you're just going to be more stressed out, which is going to make your symptoms worse. Okay? Start foundationally. Start working on building your body up. Start with whole foods. Start with getting proper sleep at night. Cut down the refined carbs. Eat healthy vegetables. Eat healthy fruits. Work on these things. Work on these responses, and your body will thank you for it, and your hormones will too. Okay? So with that being said, those are the 5 reasons why I would tell, a female, get your hormones tested, get them tested properly, get one of the Dutch tests done. And men, if you've got, issues with erections, if you have gynecomastia that's going on, or if you've got, man boobs going on, some moobs, get your hormones tested. And I'm being insensitive in a way, but I know, listen, like, this is something that we can reverse. This is something we can do something about. I know gynecomastia surgery is like $8,000 to get that stuff ripped out. Okay. But it's not going to stop the excess estrogen. It's not going to fix the problem. Fix that problem and it's going to go away. Right? And this is the male hormone thing. I'm just going to keep stabbing in on this one. In blood, right? Low testosterone, high estradiol, right? So we have too low of testosterone. So what are you going to do? Put somebody on HRT. If we know that testosterone is a direct precursor to estrogen and estrogen is too high and we give more building blocks to create more estrogen, what do you think that's going to do to that person? More estrogen, more gynecomastia. It's going to get worse, right? It's common sense. Even if you think that you have some form of a genetic issue, stop feeding the damn cause, right? So I digress. So man, if you're stuck in that situation, get out of it. That being said, again, thank you all for tuning in. This is a little bit charged of a podcast. I can tell you the next one's going to be probably even more charged than this one. I'm getting back at it. I'm going to start hammering these things out more consistently, more frequently. If you have things you want me to talk about or questions or conditions or diseases or supplements or peptides or whatever that you want me to talk about, you know where to find me. Find me on Instagram. Shoot me a DM. Let me know what you want to hear about. I'll shoot a podcast directly for you. So anyways, thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully you found this valuable. Hopefully, again, if you're a woman sitting there, don't judge your hormones based off of how your family has always had their cycle, and don't judge it based off of how your friends have their cycle as well. Your cycle, just as well as menopause, right, should be so smooth and seamless that your cycle kind of creeps up on you. Like, oh, okay, whoops, I got my period today. All right, I'll just take it easy this week and move about your day. That is optimal. That is healthy. That is what I'm trying to find for you. So if that's not you, reach out, get tested. We'll see what we can do to bring you back into health. Have a great one. I love you all. Thanks for all the love and support. We'll talk soon.